Through selfless service, you will always be fruitful and find fulfillment of your desires. With these beautiful lines from Sri Bhagavad Gita, let's commence this interlocution on the path of righteousness.
Good morning to all. I, Aditi Gupta,
And I, Akshdeep Gupta,
are here to welcome you to the interlocution on futuristic perspectives and rethinking gender norms in the era of pandemic. I request Akshdeep, advisor to the Amity Center for Gender Justice and Child Rights, who has been a part of this society for the past 3 years, to introduce the university.
thank you, Aditi. So, Amity University, Uttar Pradesh is a leading research-oriented private university established in 2005 under the State Act. Amity Law School, Noida, is a premier law institute of established in 2004 with the objective of providing high-quality education in the legal domain. The law school is committed to preparing the next generation of legal professionals who are fully equipped to face. It it is one of the largest law schools of India. I request Aditi, Deputy Convener of Amity Center Gender Justice and Child Rights, to introduce the event to the audience.
Thank you, Akshdeep. Today, Amity Center for Gender Justice and Child Rights has organized this interlocution with the perspective of throwing some light on the concept of gender norms, which has been prevalent within the socioeconomic structure, which is in part has been in the grassroots of the nation. For the longest time, the impact of gender norms in India has ever been growing and has established its working into the extensive roots that are embedded in the society. The socioeconomic culture and the gender-driven norms has set forth the futuristic approach in order to bring role in formulating new policies to drastic change within the socioeconomic structure.
Constitution morality states the bottom line principles which uphold the constitutional value. They are ideally guided by commitment to inclusive and democratic process and uphold the core structure of the nation. Therefore, the regulations put in place are in turn to provide and safeguard from such calamities in future and strengthen the pillars, the constitutional mandate. Now, I would welcome our faculty convener, Ms. Ekta Gupta ma'am. She has been the mentor and convener of Amity Center for Gender Justice and Child Rights for more than 5 years. The society has achieved great success, and we, as a part of this society, has strived to bring the society to a greater heights. Ma'am, I request you to address the session.
Thank you, Akshdeep. Bringing out a positive change during the pandemic is truly revolutionary to put forth. With this aim and objective, we, Amity Center of Gender Justice and Child Rights, brings today interlocution on futuristic perspectives and rethinking gender norms in the era of pandemic. Our journey has started before around 10 years, where my ex-colleagues, ex-students worked meticulously for the society and its regime. We, in a form of panel discussions, allocutions, publications, quizzes, many more, has provided a suitable platform to the entire fraternity, including students, researchers, academicians, and even a common man. Many social initiatives has been taken by our center in a form of self-defense workshops, debates, signing MOUs, and even adopting the village. Today, the main aim of this program is to focus on the interconnection of the society with the common man and his mindset. So what is going on in this pandemic and what will be the preparation of our life ahead? Before we go further, I, on behalf of our founder president, sir, Professor Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, who is a symbol of generosity, who taught us the true meaning of values in this pandemic times, who always encouraged us to do something useful to the society, welcome you all. I further, on behalf of my Honorable Chancellor, Sir, Dr. Atul Chauhan, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Ma'am, Professor Dr. Balwinder Shukla, welcome you all who always stood by us and been the symbol of motivation and inspiration, not only for our institution, but for the whole university. I, on behalf of our Honorable Chairman, Sir, Professor Dr. D.K. Bandyopadhyay, welcome you all who stood by us, and we are fortunate for his vision for not only guiding us, but also inculcating such values that will help us to progress even further, for keeping in mind the wellness and well-being of all. I, on behalf of both my HOIs, welcome you all, Professor Dr. Shefali Raizada ma'am, who are the epitome of generosity, intellect, and humbleness, who always listen to our views, appreciate them, and guide us to the best of our capabilities. I, on behalf of my another HOI, Professor Dr. Aditya Tomar sir, who always provide us preview and supervision for the initiative we take. I also welcome you on behalf of my co-convener, Dr. Harshita Singh, who always provided me her constant support, always keeping smile on her face, not only on her face, but in her voice also, which dilutes the tension into tiny droplets. I welcome you on behalf of my student team, Ms. Ananya Kukreti, student convener, Ms. Aditi Gupta, co-convener, my both advisor, Ms. Vanchika Jha, Akshadit Gupta, who not only how much busy they are, but they never said no to me. I also welcome you on behalf of my another advisor of Youth Parliament Society, Mr. Abhinav Narayan, who supported this event throughout. I welcome you on behalf of my colleagues, students, and staff. Our guest of honor of today is Mr. Guru Prakash. He is a person whose words speak louder than action. Sir is a national spokesperson of Bharatiya Janata Party, an academician in law. Sir is going to deliver his views on the topic constitutional morality in the era of pandemic. Our honorable chief guest for today is Professor Rajendra Pratap Gupta, former advisor to the Union for Health and Family Welfare. Sir has a strong views and wisdom in the health sector. Sir is going to enlighten us on the topic preparing for the life beyond COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Shali Aizada, ma'am, Head of Institution and Joint Director at Amity Law School, Noida. Ma'am has been a guiding light for the institution for many years, and her contribution in making Amity Law School new heights with you. Ma'am, I request you to instate a welcome address.
Thank you, Aditi. Am I audible now sufficiently?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so very, very good morning to all our distinguished guests, Guru Prakash sir, and all the participants, faculty colleagues, and student committee members. Basically, I'm really happy to have this platform and to speak on the very, very important issues, because in the last weeks, we have been focusing on the very technical technology part, but the health, social, economic structure, these are also, and the gender issues are also very, very important to focus during this shifting time of the COVID and the scenario what we have today, and many things are going to change and transform. So the concept of the gender norms has seemed to be prevalent within the socio-economic structure, family structure, and which is actually the foundation of any of the nation. So it is a very, very strong impact. What we have, the social structure, what we have, the economic structure, all are interrelated and having a long lasting and very, very strong impact on as far as India is concerned, because India always have been standing and governed by the social structure and related to the economic and other structures. So socioeconomic culture and the gender-driven society and gender-driven norms, what we have been having since ancient times and since the starting of the civilization. So we have to have always our focus on this with the given time period. So our approach always have been changing within the requirement of the and the need of the time. So this is what now again during this pandemic, we have again this platform to think or rethink over this issue, and they are very much related. There is no as such issues we are going to discuss the socio-economic, because the health, family, relationship, then caring and sharing amongst the people, where the social distancing has to be maintained. So there are various issues to think over. So this is a very, very strong and important platform which the Gender Justice Cell has brought today. And I thought when Ms. Ekta, convener, brought this idea to conduct this kind of, I was very much into favor of having this kind of the event or this kind of the interlocution on the issue, because it's a very, very high time to focus on these areas as well, apart from the technology and technical and the other mechanical kind of the things. So the fundamental aim of this platform to modify what we are going to have, what is the need of the hour. So here, during this shifting time, what needs to be done? This is the aim of this, and we are fortunate and privileged to have amongst us two very, very eminent and distinguished speakers, Mr. Guru Prakash Paswan, National Spokesperson, BJP, and Professor Rajendra Pratap Gupta, former advisor to the Union Minister for Health and Family Welfare. So we extend, on behalf of the Amity Law School, on behalf of AGAI, I extend a very warm welcome, sir, to accept our invitation to speak on, and we are very much excited to just to see what your vision is, how you throw light on these aspects so that our mental intellect would be open and we could have the second opinion, third opinion, and various thought process into this aspect. I welcome on behalf of the Amity Law School, our chairman, sir, Professor D.K. Bandyopadhyay, sir, because though I'm welcoming him on this platform, certainly sir's guidance and directions, because I always take approvals and permission from him. So always he is there, and always his encouraging words and encouraging support is there with Amity Law School, Noida. So I extend very warm welcome to sir. I also extend very warm welcome to all the faculty colleagues and the participant attendees who are available on this platform. And certainly very, very grateful and thankful to the Gender Justice Cell, our faculty convener Ekta and the Harshita. And the most important, the root of this gender justice, I'm happy to see the Abhinav, Akshti, Vanshika. I was thinking you all have been passed out. How this gender justice cell, but I believe what the foundation you have laid down, certainly this gender justice cell will go on, and you must have taught and you must have trained your juniors to just to continue with this legacy. So I'm very, very happy and to welcome again, once again, I welcome Guru Prakash sir for giving the consent, being a eminent speaker for the day, and thank you so much. Okay, over to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such praising words. I request Professor Dr. D.K. Bandyopadhyay, sir. He is chairman to Amity Law Schools and advisor to Office of Founder President, sir. Sir has been pillar of excellence for Amity Law School for many years. His exemplary guidance has molded the institution as a treasury of knowledge it is. Sir, I request you to enlighten us with your words of wisdom.
Thank you, Akshadip. First of all, I must congratulate Ekta Gupta and Dr. Harshita Singh, who has taken up these issues for today's deliberations. And certainly, once again, I would appreciate Akshadip, Vanshika, and Abhinav. So you are back to the square. All the time, we like to see the smiling faces of our students. And now, the existing students, Ananya, Ukreti, and Aditi Gupta. So you are going to take the responsibility gradually, and we shall see that how some new dimensions of the new discussions forum can be created. Because as you all know that society is all the time is of evolutionary nature. It evolves, and we have seen as a student of history, from the Stone Age to the agriculture age to the industrial age, the society has evolved. When the society has evolved, the way the employment scenario, or you can say that the way earning the bread and butter scenario has changed, the way the living standard and the living style of the people have changed. And it is all evolutionary nature. And when that society was created, I would say that society was created. And when the people used to live in the jungles, from jungles to agriculture, the domesticization of the different types of agricultural seeds, and from there, domesticization of the animals and using them, and then the technological evolution, everything we have seen, the way the societal structure has rapidly has gone on changing. Now, under this change environment, lots of issues that cropped up. And accordingly, again, society, on the basis of the different people with lots of wisdom, the concept of the morality came. And when the concept of the morality came, then it evolved that can we codify some of the morality, because morality also changes with time. Can some of them be codified and codified for a longer time? And then we can see different philosophers who came in the world and gave their different perspective, and we saw that evolution of the subject as law. And it is essentially to govern the societal structure, to give justice to the people while they are living in the society. Now, as a law school, we like to see that what are the changes that have been taking place around. Because all of us know, dear students, those who are participating, and dear faculty members who are participating, all of us know that any education institutions are known what are the different convulsions or convolution of the ideas that takes place within the premises or within the classroom, within the corridors. And those ideas generally shapes up in terms of the different types of reformation in the future days to come. And there are hundreds of such type of examples. So Amity Law School, Noida, we encourage such type of ideas generations, such type of ideas articulation, such type of ideas in terms of leading toward the change and the governance of the society. And the gender justice and child rights cell has picked up the right type of topics under the pandemic situations. How really, as a nation, we have seen, is there any change in the societal structure? Is there any change in the socio-economic structure? Because when we say societal structure, essentially economic is also involved within it. So socio-economic structure, is there any change? Under pandemic situation, we have seen we are able to differentiate between the cost of living and the lifestyle cost. And this cost of living and lifestyle cost, if we can differentiate between these two, due to the evolutionary nature of the society, the cost of living is not more than 1/10 of maintaining our lifestyle cost. And that is the type of thing that we are now accustomed to. Now, pandemic has taught us during the last 2 years just to remain confined in our houses, in our homes, and we have seen that it is very difficult to spend money other than whatever we need to eat. And that living cost and lifestyle cost and the way people should actually maintain, again, has created a different type of new structure of the society. Now, once the pandemic will be over, then again we have to see how really it is getting changed. Have the people taken the lessons out of it? Because while we are talking about maintaining the lifestyle cost, we have forgotten many things, many moral values, many societal values. Even I would say that we have become so greed surpassed our needs, and we have actually damaged the whole environment where we live in. Whole societal life we have destroyed. In my childhood, I used to see that people used to come to everybody's house, they used to exchange, they used to have different types of discussions, and I have hardly seen any psychological cases. Now today when I look at that, societal changes have already taken place, and hardly anybody visits anybody's house. Even the children, they visit their parents as a guests. I mean, that is the way how the society has changed. Now, pandemic has taught us that is it the right way of living? Is the right way of spending our time in this mother planet? And are you giving justice to it? Now, pandemic has taught us, and pandemic has also taught us how the governance system can we make more effective in terms of taking care of the basic necessity of the people? How do we really manage this pandemic? How do we really come out of the pandemic situation? How do we come out from working from home or staying in the home to coming to the places where we can meet and make a meeting grounds for each other? Now, this deliberation and this dialogue, interlocution, means this dialogue, this conversation, and in terms of the future perspectives, I think is a very, very apt topics. What is going to happen? What has happened during the pandemic time, and what is the care that has been taken by our governance system? What is the care has been taken by our family structure, family system, and then what is going to happen as and when the pandemic gets over? So, I mean, for making this dialogue, making these conversations, I think we have, rather Ekta and Harshita, both of them have identified two very, very eminent speakers who will be speaking in a different dimension because it's such a huge dimensions. So they will be picking up some of the very important dimensions, and they'll show us that are we going to live for self, or are we going to live for others? Are we going to have the complete faith in our governance system, or can we also help how the governance system can become very effective? And this dialogue, this conversation must be there in education institutions. That's the reason when Dr. Ayajada came to me and said, Sir, Ekta and Harshita, they want to this type of thing. I say, yes, why not? Because let there be a conversation, let there be a discussions, unless until we discuss it, how the new ideas can be generated. So I welcome on behalf of the entire Amity Law School, Noida, Professor Rajendra Pratap Gupta ji, that we are really privileged to have you over here. You are such an important person. I know that you are such an important person, and really, and you are going to talk about what is the precautionary measure to be taken to face the third wave. And people are all actually concerned. First wave, second wave, third wave, like first generation, second generation, third generation. The third generation is coming. Then what should we do as a precautionary measure in taking care of that? And the second speaker, Mr. Guru Prakash Paswan ji, and the constitutional morality arising in the era of pandemic. That is it that what about constitutional morality has been propagated, or has been articulated, or has been jotted down, and in giving the justice to the people of the nation, that what is that new thing that will be arising in the era of pandemic in terms of providing the constitutional morality? So I mean, these two very important topics, and which is very, very topical, and we are going to discuss, we are going to deliberate, and I think students will be benefited out of these deliberations. And let there be many questions, so that the speakers who will be speaking on this subject, they will be answering those questions, so that then proper dialogue will come. Unfortunately, again, pandemic has made us to meet virtually, and we would have loved to meet physically. We would have loved to see each other face, real face, and then real question answer sessions, and that would have been much more effective. But nevertheless, when the situations are like this, we have to find some alternative, and this is the best alternative that we can have. So once again, I, on behalf of the Amity Universe, on behalf of our founder president, Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, on behalf of our very, very dear Chancellor, Dr. Atul Chauhan, and our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Balminder Shukla, once again, I welcome both of the speakers, Professor Rajendra Kumar Gupta and Mr. Guru Prakash Paswan. Sir, we are really privileged, we are really honored, and your deliberations will essentially give value addition to the participants, those who will be listening to both of you. So with these few words, once again, I must congratulate Ekta and Harshita for taking up the subject, and certainly I will be failing in my duties if I do not profusely appreciate Dr. Shefali Raijada, because she is so much particular about identifying the people who can give justice to a particular thing, a particular program, a particular event to be conducted, And when she found that proposals, good proposals are coming, she rejects many proposals. But when the good proposals come, she immediately accepts it, and she immediately tries how best this can be conducted. So with these words, I once again thank you all, and I hope a great deliberations, a great conversation, and really that name that you have given, intercollusion, and let that be real intercollusions on this particular topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your wise words. Now I would invite Mr. Abhinav Narayan Jha, who is advisor to Amity Youth Parliament Organizing Committee. I invite him to introduce our honorable speaker, Mr. Guru Prakash Paswan, sir.
Hello and welcome. Good morning, one and all present in this web seminar on the topic very contemporary interlocution on futuristic perspective and rethinking gender norms in the era of pandemic. I would like to introduce one of the youngest national spokesperson of Bharatiya Janata Party and also the eminent personality and eminent speaker for this web seminar, Mr. Guru Prakash Paswan. Mr. Guru Prakash Paswan is currently serving the post of national spokesperson, Bharatiya Janata Party. He is also a fellow of Indian Foundation. Mr. Guru Prakash is an advisor to the Dalit Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. By his word of wisdoms, sir is setting out an example to the country, not only the country, to the whole youngster, and also he has done various publication on political uprise and the prevalent issues sustaining to the society and young generation. His words of wisdom and his words of wisdom in the politics upon various digital platform gives a valuable essence to the nation. Sir will be dealing on the very contemporary and foremost important topic titled Constitutional Morality Arising in the Era of Pandemic. Now I would invite Sir to speak on this very contemporary issue. Sir, over to you.
We welcome you,
Namaskar.
sir.
Namaskar. Am I audible? Can you see?
Yes. Very much audible, sir.
Yes, sir.
There are no connection issues. My audio is fine, right? Abhinav?
Sir, little bit hitch in the audio.
My
but it's
audio
going
and
to
video both are
Now it's audible, sir.
great. So thank you so much for having me around. I was listening to the Honorable Director, Mr. Bandyopadhyay, and the actual words of wisdom he has given us the guiding light and what we call the Margdarshan. He has set the direction right for the discussion and for the conversation which we are going to have in the next 1 hour. And it is very interesting to have this sort of a discussion under the leadership of Professor Bandyopadhyay and very able faculty members as well. I come from the world of both academics and politics, as has been brought out by Abhinav. So, as a student who has been trained in law, I consider law obviously is my first profession, and I teach at Patna University. I teach the postgraduate students. I passed out from National Law University, Bhopal in 2011. So it was like 10 years ago. We were the first few people who were part of the 5-year law program, and the National Law University ecosystem. It just began during that time. So it is truly a privilege and a matter of honor for me to be present at this very august gathering of very dynamic students, very able faculty members, and obviously we heard the brilliant exposition by Mr. Bandyopadhyay, and in a sense he has set the context for the discussion which we are going to have. He has told about the social structures changes that has happened in the period of pandemic. Friends, we all know that this pandemic was once in a century pandemic, and as we know, it's an unprecedented pandemic. The sort of challenges which we saw was unfathomable, and both at the social level, at the political level, and the economic level as well. The challenges were immense, and at this time, it would have been difficult for any government, any leadership, which we saw that the Western countries with advanced healthcare system, we saw the sort of images that came from countries like Italy, Spain, and France in the first wave, and the sort of devastation which we have noticed. I think it's obviously once in a generation thing, and the very important discussion which is now happening in the public discourse is that are we ever going to get back during like the pre-COVID days, or is it the new normal? The mask, the sanitization, the virtual meetings, the virtual seminar and conferences, is it the new normal or not? Obviously, we would not like it to be the new normal, but with the sort of pandemic and the variants which are evolving, the virus is also mutating, the virus is also evolving. So we have to be very careful. We have to be very, very cautious. And I think it's a very good, obviously, it's not a beginning. I hope it is a permanent feature of your institution that you're having this sort of a discussion. And it's always very critical to give your student a ring sight perspective. I always believe that beyond books, beyond the real-time exposure and experience part, it's also very important. And I hope that students are also participating in large numbers, because the sort of content which is available digitally now is huge. And I urge all of you, the student community, to make the most of it, to take the leverage out of it. Friends, the topic which has been given to me is obviously constitutional morality. And we have been hearing a lot about constitutional morality these days. But it's very important, it's very pertinent for us to trace the origin, to trace the roots of constitutional morality. And in the Indian constitutional law context, when did this conversation around constitutional morality, that's very important, that's very imperative for over it. So I would like to tell you that during the Constituent Assembly debates and Constituent Assembly debates, it's very important because, and I would request all my student friends, all my young friends, whoever are participating in this discussion, to go through the Constituent Assembly debates time to time. Any issue that has come, any issue that you are researching, let's say fundamental rights, let's say freedom of speech and expression, you must go to the CAD, the Constituent Assembly debates, and get a sense of perspective on what were the contestations from both the sides. Recently, there were discussions on Article 370, for that matter, on Kashmir, and what were the circumstances that actually led to the constitutional provision in the original constitution. Article 370 was Article 306A, so the instrument of accession. You would find it really interesting before forming an opinion, because it is the age of technology. It is the age of clickbait. You like to write something where your sole incentive is to get the maximum number of clicks on social media. So as an academic, as a serious law student, as a scholar, it is our fundamental duty to go beyond that and do some in-depth research. And once you go to the CADs, you make it a point, like any law issue come, for that matter, the Twitter issue is also there. And the question of digital sovereignty. The question of digital sovereignty is also existing, that whether Twitter, which is a non-state actor, we all agree on the fact that Twitter is a non-state actor. They are the social media giants, and they are having huge impact. They are impacting democracies as well. They're impacting democracies in the developed part of the world. So what is going to be the future of these non-state actors in defining the future course of democracy? So that is a very interesting subject. So the point which I'm trying to convey here is that do refer to the Constituent Assembly debates. That would give you insight, a perspective, and a sort of very interesting arguments as well. That how did the makers of our Constitution, how did they actually envision the decades ahead, the future for us, the citizens of the country? So the first reference to constitutional morality, friends, is in the Constituent Assembly debates, and Dr. Ambedkar, he makes it very categorical while explaining. He says that constitutional morality provides a principled understanding for unfolding the works of governance. So it's very important. Obviously, Constitution gives you the three different separation for three different organs. So where does this picture of constitutional morality comes? So Ambedkar says that it specifies norms for institutions. Now, what is norms? Norms for institution to survive and an expectation of behavior that will not just meet that text, but the soul of the constitution. So that's very critical. So a very important point here, Ambedkar is trying to make, that what is the soul and the spirit of the constitution? Fine, there are texts written, there are words, there are languages, there are vocabulary, but the spirit and soul, what was the intention? So whenever there is a sort of issue of governance, you must go back to the constituent, you must go back to the constitution and try to identify the soul. So we believe that the constitution was intended to cover everyone, regardless of the region, religion, gender, social background, faith, and so on and so forth. So for the constitution, the fundamental cornerstone is equality. So whenever you are facing an issue in governance, you must go back to the soul and spirit of the constitution, which told you and again that you have to be serving the last person in the line. The last person in the line, regardless of any sort of prejudices, regardless of any discrimination. And therefore, you see the particular infrastructure, I say, the constitutional infrastructure with respect to fundamental rights, Article 12 to 35, the Directive Principles of State Policy from 36 to 51, the preamble and fundamental duties. So these four parts are very essential to understand and decode the sense of constitutional morality. So Ambedkar, as we all know, he was a scholar par excellence, Columbia, London School. You see that a person who is coming from such a underprivileged background, such a challenging circumstances, even today, people like you and me will think twice or thrice that whether to go to a foreign land to pursue our education or not. But a person who is coming from such a challenging social background, he had that vision and foresight. No, I must do it for the people of the country. I must pursue constitution. I must pursue my academics. So he makes it a point, and he was among the first few Indians to go to Columbia and like I said, a scholar par excellence. We only know the one aspect of it, that his contribution in the constitution, but he was an economist. He has written extensively about economics and the ideas of fiscal federalism, the ideas of financial federalism, which we see today, the distribution of revenues, the distribution of taxes, and the finance commission, which was envisioned in Article 280. So Ambedkar as an economist, Ambedkar as an anthropologist, Ambedkar as a foreign policy analyst, Ambedkar as a constitution maker as well. So one man, many dimensions. So if we are doing a sort of analysis of constitutionality, we must have a sense of weight and he point that person also did very to know that he has also referred to Grote. Grote was a very senior scholar, and by quoting Grote, he has said that a paramount reference for the forms of constitution, which is an obedience to authority, acting under and within the forms, yet combined with the habit of open speech. So he's given different dimensions which Grote has given in his rendition. So Grote was probably the one of the first few jurists who also spoke about constitutional morality. So there is a sense of origin that we get, but as per our political affiliations, as per our inclination, we always make it a point to use constitutional methods and constitutional vocabulary to sort of pursue, to sort of follow up our agendas. That is what is happening today. So whenever we see that people say, in fact, a couple of days ago, on June 25th, the country was remembering the Black Day of the Constitution, the emergency. And it is important to remember emergency because that was the only phase, and I'm sure Professor Bandyopadhyay would have had a real-time perspective, he would have seen the days, and he can obviously give you another exposition on how bad it was. The things we take for granted, like newspapers. Newspapers, I am told that, and what I have read from the emergency literature, it was a rare commodity during those days. You could hear only the news, the songs, which was approved by the government. So it's very important. So constitutional morality is also linked with your constitutional rights, which you take for granted. We see that today, when we say that today there are allegations on the government that no, there is an emergency, there is no freedom of speech and expression. I raise a very fundamental point. You say that there is emergency, you say there is emergency-like situation, but on the borders of NCR, there is a protest happening for the last 7-8 months, and you say there is an emergency. Point number one. The Supreme Court of India nullifies the law which is passed by a democratically elected government. You say there is an emergency. On the social media, we see the sort of abuses, and I'm not saying criticism, mark my word, the sort of abuses which is used for the Prime Minister. Like, I'm sure in the entire political history of our country, this is for the first time that a Prime Minister is abused left, right, and center on social media, and then you say there is an emergency-like situation. So we must be wary of this. We must be cautious of it. As a scholar, as a student of law, because all of us here obviously are student of law, we like to follow law. So it's very important to not get driven away, to not get prejudiced on the basis of our political affiliations and political inklings. And hence it becomes very important and imperative for students like us to have a sort of important perspective. So in that sense, try to give you a general understanding of morality. And it's a complete honor, it's a privilege, and I would love to be associated with this venture in whatever way I can, because since I come from the world which is a sort of mixture of law and politics, a meeting space, because we see during the independence struggle as well, be it Motilal Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru, Ambedkar, Sardar Patel, Mahatma Gandhi himself, they were all accomplished lawyers. So I think it's very important for you, young law students, to come forward and lead the country whenever it is required. But at the same time, all must have a very nuanced understanding of law. So yes, with this, I would like to sum up my observations and my sort of understanding on this issue. And I hope I gave you a perspective on constitutional morality and its contemporary relevance. Thank you so much for having me, Professor Bandyopadhyay, and the team of faculty and the young team of students. Thank you.
If some
Thank you.
questions to be asked, so Akshadi, Diti,
Yes, ma'am. May I ask a question?
yes, please.
Sir, as you mentioned a lot of information about social media. So I would like to ask how social media has changed the norms of constitutional morality, how it has impacted how it used to be and how it is now.
That is a very interesting question, Aditi. And like I said, that social media has played a very fundamental role in defining the course of the governments. Like you saw what happened in the United States for that matter. You know, our biggest USP is our democracy, and more importantly, the smooth transition of power. The transition of power in India has been smooth and peaceful and without any controversy in the course of our last 7 decades. But we saw what happened in the United States of America, which claims to be the oldest democracy, more than 200 years. We saw when the supporters of Donald Trump, they sort of ransacked the White House, the temple of democracy in the United States of America. That has never happened in India. And a large part of that anxiety was driven by social media. The second important aspect which I would like to bring to your notice, Aditi, is that we were aware of this Cambridge Analytica controversy, which happened in the last presidential election. It has been happening, and there are many documentaries on Netflix which I would urge all of you to have a look at. Uh, all of us are on social media, and social media is playing a defining role on our choices. Social media company was accused of manipulating our choices. So, on the basis of our articles which we read, on the basis of our uh, the cuisine we prefer, on the basis of our culture, we were constantly being fed up of the news, the views which would influence and manipulate our political choice. So that is also wrong. And there are a number of legislation going on in the West, especially in the United States of America. They are trying to tame them, but it's important here to have a sense of historical perspective. Pre 91, it was a bipolar world. Then came the unipolar world with United States of America as the chief power. Now, with the emergence of China, we see a multipolar world. So unipolar, bipolar, USA, USSR, pre-91. Then after 91, unipolar for some time, United States of America. So after some time, after that, multipolar world. We have seen China emerging as an important power. But this day and age, it is neither unipolar, nor bipolar, not multipolar. It is the heteropolar world. It is very important to have a sense of perspective on heteropolar world where these non-state actors have become very important. When I say non-state actors, they are not constitutional actors. They are not government people. They are simply ISIS for that matter. ISIS is a non-state actor. ISIS is not limited. Influence of ISIS is not limited to a certain jurisdiction. You cannot limit it. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, these people are not limited to one geographical jurisdiction, one legal jurisdiction. Their jurisdiction exceeds nations. Facebook in itself is a nation of so many people. You can have so many nations on social media. So that's very critical. Social media regulation, social media. And when I say social media regulation, I don't necessarily mean it would have any impact on freedom of speech and expression. The sort of conversation which are going on now, in the sense there are many complaints which we get of harassment of women. And so the recent reforms that has happened, the recent information technology guidelines that has come, they've only asked the social media company to have a sort of grievance redressal mechanism in India. So if there is a harassment case, you are asked to go to America and file a complaint. That is not going to happen. So the users of the social media must be empowered at any cost. Social media cannot be allowed to explore freely and impact, because the sort of allegations, and I'm not going to take a position here, because it's an academic discussion, I'm not uh, defending any idea, defending any policy here, but it's important for a scholarly conversation on this issue that they have become data colonizers. Our data is there. What Aditi likes, what songs she wants to listen, what places that Avinav like to go for eating, what is his political affiliation. So that is my own personal business. You have got no business to interfere in my personal business, but you are doing that without even our consent. Like before we sign on to any social media, we give our consent. We don't read that. We rarely read that. So this problem is there, but like I said, it is for citizens like us, to keep our democracy and keep our constitutional authority as robust as possible. I hope I was able to answer you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening words. These thoughts have surely enhanced our way of living. Now I would open the floor for question and answers. If any attendee has any question they would want to ask our speaker, please post the queries in the question answers box. Please mark the question to all. Sir, in addition to that, I have a small question I would want to ask. So I want to ask, I have been following Lok Sabha discussions and, everything politically that happens I like to watch it. But I've always not understood one thing, that the difference that, like, you compared many countries recently, right? In the past question, you compared many countries. But the two factors there are, which I think have not been discussed anywhere. One, India has a multi-party system, and US, if we compare it to US, has a bi-party system. So the demographic is really different. Secondly, the news which reaches us is really fast nowadays as compared to when we are talking about when we got independent, right? So I want you to answer as in how is the nexus between two affecting us in now, matlab, in the day and age right now?
No, what is your question here? Like,
Question is that the news is reaching us fast, right? So if something happens in US, reaches us really fast today. So is that, considering social media and everything, the news is reaching to us really fast. So is that the reason for aggression in people? Is that the reason because of which the people are, on the roads really faster than before? Because pehle, it used to happen that it used to take some time. People used to get the news did not spread that fast. So is it affecting us in a bad or a good way?
actually, that's an interesting question, but I would like to ask a question, like, is it under our control?
Sir, should
Is
I
it,
ask?
it is,
I
it is
don't know.
not under, yes, someone wants to speak?
Sir, I am speaking, Ekta
Please,
Gupta.
please,
Sir,
please.
I want to add one thing. What is he's trying to say? Let's mold little bit that what is the impact of actually digital sovereignty? What he's trying to say, he's covering one of the aspect, but let's broadify that. What is the impact of actually the digital sovereignty? What do you think that what is its great impact?
Correct, correct. No, ma'am, I think we should be ready to accept changes. We should, because the world is changing. The technology is changing at a much faster pace that we can even imagine, that we can even fathom. There are talks of artificial intelligence, there are talks of virtual reality, and if we don't get used to it, so I think role that social media giants in terms of unicorns, we have seen that they are doing the damage. They are doing the damage in the real constitutional sense. So how do we catch up with them? How do we catch up with the pace? See, it's going to remain like this. The world has changed fundamentally. Like 20 years ago, or for that matter, even 15 years ago, you could not imagine reading Economist or New York Times or Washington Post on your hands. So now the entire world is a global village. But like Professor Bandyopadhyay said, and he made a very pertinent point that whether we are going to traverse back or there is going to be a new uncharted path which we are going to see. But the only way we can be prepared as scholars, as jurists, as law practitioners is to constantly keep ourselves updated. And that's a very important lesson there. Even in this pandemic, those who are not updated, they were left behind. It's very difficult. So I think, Akshdeep, your question is very pertinent. And ma'am has also asked about digital sovereignty. But when controversies like Cambridge Analytica comes, that social media was used as a vehicle. Mark my words, social media was used as a vehicle to manipulate your choices. So it is not the flaw of a democracy. It is not the flaw of democracy. Democracy is still intact. You are going out in large number, you are voting. But on what basis are you voting? On what basis are you expressing your franchisee? Are you doing it on the basis of your own will and conscience? Or that will and conscience is hugely impacted by the sort of stuff which you see on social media? So I think this is a challenge. This is a challenge which is going to be dealt with people like us, but I term them as a neo-techno feudal actors. This is new age techno feudalism. New age techno feudalism, which we see happening. Digital feudalism. In Hindi, we say digital samantwad. So, how do we come out with this digital samantwad? I don't have a clear answer to it, but I'm sure with the able team of faculty members and the young and promising researchers under the guidance of Professor Bandyopadhyay, we must initiate a research paper on this or organize a series of discussion like this, that we can have a technology expert, we can have people who deal with this intermingling of law and technology and have a much concrete, actionable, doable points which we can give to the government and sort of prepare our next generation, the next crop of law students with this. Ma'am? Ekta ji?
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, really. And we would definitely discuss with our sir, and definitely if something do we can do in research. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for all the questions. We would like to take the rest of
I
the
think-
questions in the end.
I think it's a beautiful answer. And thank you
Sir,
very
sir.
much.
Sir,
Beautiful,
sir.
beautiful.
Sir, I would once the pandemic settles down, so I would come and seek your blessing, sir. Thank you so
For
much
sure.
for having me, sir.
You can come and interact with the student.
Sir,
Yes.
sir.
Definitely invite you, sir. We'll definitely.
ठीक. चलिए. Thank you, Abhinav.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the questions. We would take the rest of the questions in the end. Further, I would like to welcome our guest of honor, Professor Rajendra Pratap Gupta, for interlocution on the topic Preparing for Life Beyond COVID-19. I want to take this opportunity to introduce Sir. He's currently a member of Central Council of Health and Family Welfare, the apex advisory body of the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Sir has made innumerable contributions to public policy, innovation, and healthcare over the past decade. With over 2 decades of experience as a policy leader, economist, and healthcare expert, Professor Gupta is likely to bring a fresh and practical perspective to the ministry. Sir, I would request you to please commence with the session.
Thank you, Aditya. And first, I'll make a small correction that what you read was bypassed in terms of being a member of the council and the advisor. So I'm the former advisor. However, I've been in policy making. So firstly, I thank Ekta for inviting me and the Amity Center for Gender Justice and Child Rights. I also thank Professor Shefali Raizada for the very interesting opening remarks, and for Dr. D.K. Bandyopadhyay for a very enlightening discussion to set the tone. I think it's always a learning for me to interact with students. And I heard my previous speaker, Guru Prasad Paswan, very interesting insights on constitutional morality. And my team was discussing with Ekta, and we agreed that I'm going to talk about the how to navigate the post-pandemic scenario, preparing your life for post-COVID. So it would be difficult unless you understand how the world is evolving. Because if you don't get a sense of how the world is evolving, you will find it tough to navigate the new order that's coming. So firstly, we all understand it's a truly globalized world, but yet it's controlled by the rich. We have to get everything in perspective before we jump to understand what it is. So new world order is emerging. COVID has fast-tracked many things. More than that, it has changed many things forever. Now that's very important. I know the students that join the law course would have a different opportunity in mind when they join, and when you probably pass out, the goalpost would have changed. In the last 2 years, I think the entire way we look at education, the way we attend classes has changed. But more than that, how we're going to do our jobs has changed much more. That has fundamentally undergone a big shift. Now that being the reality, so we know that one thing will change, not only the education, but the way we work will also change. I think Guru Prasad ji very rightly talked about the multipolar and the heteropolar world. And this is something we all need to understand. In a globalized world, people say, which nation rules the world, whether it's America or China? I would take a different take on this way you look at the powers. I'm not much concerned about nations. They are still democracies. I'm concerned about the corporations. And I'll give you a sense of the 4 corporations which are trillion-dollar corporations. Microsoft, Apple, Alphabet, that's Google, and Amazon. So I can bet you anyone today who is attending this webinar would be impacted by at least 2 of these 4, if not 4. At least for sure, Microsoft and Google. And these corporations, why I bring this in the discussion of life beyond COVID is, they have the wherewithal, they have the clout and the political backing to move things and impact us. And so very clearly, few changes that you will see becoming more profound with time. One is gig economy. All of you will be looking to getting into job or settling down to start a business will get impacted by gig economy. I haven't done a full-time job after 2007. I've been into part-time. I did. The second thing is internet. Internet will change the lives, the way we work, the way we look, the way we interact. That's how we are interacting today. And the third thing is automation. We'll start feeling the pinch of automation in the years to come, and I guess in next 2-3 years. I think this is very clear that COVID has changed the way we look at things. And those who manage, I believe that net and technology will not only change the economic, but also power centers. So you will see the economic and power centers moving in the hands of few. We need to be aware of this development. And this is very important because that's the way world is moving. Even if you look at the 2019 and 2020 FDI in India, you will see most of it went to tech-driven corporation, not manpower-intensive corporations. That has a signal for all of us. Me at this office, you in your classes, or today attending this webinar. Now I will walk you through few reality checks. You can call them negative points. And they're very important because you cannot close your eyes to reality. India is still what we call a lower middle income country. And how do you define that? Is if you have a GDP per capita of $1,026 to $3,995. So our GDP per capita was 2,198 in 2019. In last 2 years of successive years of pandemic, which we know has battered every economy in the world, I guess we should be at least down by 10%. So we are less than $2,000 per capita. Effectively means that we are at the bottom of LMIC. We are not at the top rung. So for us to graduate into middle income economies is a long walk. It's going to be a really long walk, which means that the resources are stretched for us, for the government. Also here, I would draw an attention to the announcement our Honorable Prime Minister made that, we will going to feed 800 million people with free ration till Diwali, which effectively gets us to the reality of the purchasing power and the spending power of the so-called middle class and lower middle class. Now that's the challenge. Being law students, I want to touch two more facts. One is that India needs 10 to 12 million jobs a year, which is 1 to 1.2 crore jobs. And with COVID having impacted jobs, I think the number would have gone up drastically. However, on the law front, I would give an example of the largest bank in the Russian Federation, Sberbank. So now 1/3 of their decisions on loans are taken by artificial intelligence. Robotic lawyers have replaced 3,000 lawyers in their legal team. And this year, they will reduce their back-end team by 98%. Well, this is the part of the thing that you should know. I won't call it a negative, but it's a reality check. But given that, this is a center for gender justice and child rights, I want to bring also two data, which are very recent, I guess came out this week, that 15 to 24-year-old, 46% of them said they lost their jobs and 57% of the women. So really tuning into the focus of your center. Now, let me also tell you that you don't need to get drowned by negative news. Well, these are the realities. When you look back at humanity, you don't look at these historic episodes like pandemic and say, look, we are now set back, we can't do anything. It's not like that. Look at 1918 pandemic, the flu. When you look back at 1918 and look at today, the world has changed. We are far, far ahead. We are far, far better. And I think we were able to, address the issue of getting vaccine in less than a year's time. So humanity has always progressed and it's resilient. And the other side is, it's a typical psyche, as humans. Like you all students prepare for exams are nearing. So we, when get pushed to the wall, we immediately get into action. So I guess pandemic has also galvanized the global forces to say, let's find solutions. And I am not pessimistic. I'm pretty optimistic that, we will come out better. We'll find better ways to rebuilding the world. In 2018, I wrote a book called Your Vote Is Not Enough. When I looked at the scenario of opportunities India had, we could actually create a minimum of 68 crore jobs. I'd gone sector-wise. So I see a great opportunity on that. But I want to bring you to one statistic. Somehow I never looked or found that in our policy discussions. And one is that every percentage growth in GDP creates 7.5 lakh jobs. Now, if we were to look at even the old data of creating 10 to 12 million jobs a year. India's economic growth of GDP per capita required is 13.3 to 16% per year. If you look at the job losses of pandemic and if we add that up, it should touch for 20%. Now the natural question that will come to your mind is, can we do that? And as a policymaker, my answer would be, do we have a choice? We have to do that. And the other reason why we have to do that is that there is something that we have been talking for a long time. It's called demographic dividend. We say that India is a young country, there is demographic dividend. So you should also understand there is a demographic window of opportunity. Let's not get that out of sight. What is the demographic opportunity and what is the demographic responsibility? So let me draw you to one number again. How many years do we have for demographic opportunity? Till 2045, we would be 1.69 billion population. But the most important number for you to understand is that you will have 20% of the population which is senior citizens. Effectively, it will be like 338 million. So the entire window we have for making India a developed country is just next 24 years. So what are the shifts we need to make? I wrote a book during the height of pandemic last year. It's called Tough Choices and Hard Decisions Rebuilding India, where I look at all the statistics, the data of what we need to do. So clearly, incremental thinking won't help. It has to be exponential thinking. I think the self-reliant India was the starting point of the book, and our Honorable Prime Minister talked about self-reliant India. The second thing which we need to do is something that all the students should think about here, including the policymakers. You will be future policymakers. I'm sure that is going to happen. Do we need small number of large companies in India, or do we need large number of small companies? The very economic model of the country is a accumulated growth model, what I call it. So the wealth that gets generated gets accumulated to a few. What you actually need is a distributed growth model, which is decentralized at district level development. So I think this is something that you should be prepared to work on. And why should everyone be, looking at Delhi, Bangalore, Bombay, and other metros? Unless we get to the stage where we get reverse migration, our goal of making India a developed country will never be achieved. So as current students who will drive the change going forward, I think we should be mindful of that fact. The other thing is that COVID has just shown us that if you are healthy, if you have better immunity, we all probably came out of this pandemic, as we are still in the woods with the pandemic. But more important message that we got is planet's health is also important. I want to talk to you about just few data sets that each one of us are not aware of probably. So when you do a Google search, your carbon footprint, it's 0.07 grams to 5 grams, depending on the power efficient laptop or a power hungry laptop. If you send an email, you spend between 4.5 to 50 grams of carbon emissions to the nature. And 78% of these emails are spam. And they add 20 million tons of carbon footprint to the planet every year. I think all of us, when we think about development, think about our progress, cannot dissociate environment from it. And that is something that I want to bring your focus on. Every hour of usage of mobile will add 1250 kilograms of carbon emissions in a year to the planet. And when you do this 2 hour of webinar, it will be 24 grams of carbon emissions to the planet. I strongly think that each one of us have to be responsible. So you will plant a tree. We need to be carbon neutral. We can't afford to be, raising the temperatures of the planet and become inhabitable habitable over time. Last few points before, we end, that education system doesn't teach you Moore's law. It's 55 years old. And the Moore's law says the power of computing doubles every 24 months. And the second is Buckminster-Fuller's knowledge doubling curve. So these are covered in detail in my book on education, and no brainer because I was one of the 9 members of the National Education Policy Committee who drafted that policy. And there's a book called Your Degree is Not Enough, where I've covered these in detail. Now, why I'm saying these two? The Buckminster-Fuller curve says between 1400 and 1900, the information doubled every 500 years. When we reached 19th century, it was 100 years. As we talk today, it is 12 hours. So just imagine, you've done a 3-year course in law, when the power of computing doubles every 24 months and the information doubles every 12 hours. One of the messages is very clear to you. A 3-year education needs to continue lifelong. You cannot be satisfied having done a degree or two. You need to continuously keep upskilling yourself, keep adding degrees, and keep growing. That's the way it will be. And when I look at who will solve these problems, every time I travel abroad or someone interacts with me, they ask, "Sir, कौन से sector में हम काम करें जहाँ पे we can do something?" I'm literally shocked, because look at any sector. Tell me if those sectors are not needing a radical transformation. Every sector that you touch needs a radical transformation. That means students of your age have, I'll say, unparalleled opportunity to. So I see a great opportunity. I'm very optimistic. When you transform those sectors, you will not only create job and wealth, you will also create all-round happiness. That is something that I see, and I am convinced that you will do that. Those who have read the National Education Policy, I must tell you, as a member, I took the way out to go to villages, went to schools, colleges as a member, rather than sitting in the ministry office. I got the best ideas from students. And I have mentioned that every time, that the best ideas came from students from class 8 to class 12. The reason I say that is they have no baggage. They don't come with the baggage I have. They have no blinkers. They are very open-minded. Even the kind of questions that were asked in the past with Mr. Guru Prasad were clear articulation of the fact you're not going to accept everything on face value. You're going to question them. On the point that you had asked about social media and democracies, I wrote a detailed article a few weeks ago called "Social Media Subverting Democracy." See, earlier the leaders came from work. When they did work on ground, people saw them, people noticed them, they voted for them, or by word of mouth. Now what happens, even if you don't do work, you can have a lot of image and perceptions created through social media and still win an election. That's how social media is subverting democracy. Democracy as an institution, when it came 350 years ago, was not meant in the age of social media. Something that this age will have to look at. I wrote 2 articles, one in Outlook and one in Dani Jagran about it. But I think some discussion and debates should start now, that what kind of democracy would be in the age of social media. I'm not holding any strong views on that, but I think I'm very clear that when the youth of this country, the students who are today on at this webinar, when they decide to jump into bring change and take stewardship of sectors to drive change, I think nothing can stop them from bringing the change. And the world is looking at radical thinkers, transforming people, who are thinkers and doers. And I guess that will be you. With this, I thank everyone for hearing me out, and I look forward to questions if you have any. Thank you.
I request for attention from all the dignitaries and attendees. The fundamental aim of this event was to modify the structure of gender-based norms and the socioeconomic reforms that are put in place and have supported the dynamic shift during this course of pandemic. Now, I would like to request our faculty convener, Ms. Ekta Gupta ma'am, to give a small introduction and welcome our guest for the release of the book, Clinical Trial, Regulative Legal Controls on Biological Warfare.
Ma'am, first of all, we are very much fortunate enough, as it is said, that nothing is completed without being reached to its destination. And if we have to analyze the value of anything, we have to see all the contributions in it, and we really appreciate it. We are really fortunate to get the foreword of Professor Rajendra Pratap Gupta, sir. Sir has penned down, and sir what has said that sir has a very, very diversified, broadified, and a valuable contribution in the publication sector. Sir has many beautiful, useful pieces of research. Sir, vision and work in research and development is highly commendable and appreciated. Thank you so much, sir, for making our book more valuable. I am really much thankful to our founder, president, sir, chancellor, sir, vice chancellor, ma'am, chairman, sir, both the HOIs for giving us opportunity to bringing out these different pieces of research. This book, Clinical Trials, Regulative Legal Controls on Biological Warfare, is been published by Harts Bloomberry. We are very much thankful to our publisher, especially to Ms. Jyoti Malhotra. Ma'am, you have been our constant support. Thank you so much. The editor-in-chief of the book is Professor Dr. Shefali Raizata. Many thanks, ma'am, for motivating us, not only giving us the opportunities, but also giving the valuable contribution in the book in a form of a chapter. I am very much thankful to all the authors. We have the 34 authors in the book, comprising of many academicians from our institute: Ruchi Lal, Nilma Devi, Nilakshi, Richa Yadav, Kanika Kundiyal, Suparna Vinayak, Dr. Harshita Singh. Our many students have contributed. Our ex-students, Pooja Pallavi, Pratyush Sonakia, Akshdeep Gupta, Mansa, and many more. I am very much thankful, and it is bearing the ISBN number. I am thankful to my student editorial team comprising of, again, Pratyush Sonakia. Pratyush, may God give you the strength to you and your family. Thank you so much. In this difficult times, you worked so hard. Akshdeep Gupta, Vanshika Jha, Vani Vishal, Ananya Kukreti. I am very much thankful to Dr. Rupender Kaur for her constant technical support, no matter whenever I need it. Thank you so much. Ma'am, few words.
I would love to say something here, though it is not required, because you have given all the details, but it's from my heart. I'm really, really thankful. Gratitude, firstly, to Professor Rajendra Pratap Gupta, sir. I was in some other meeting, so I just was disconnected. But very, very thankful for accepting our invitation for the day. And secondly, your touch to this book. I think it has given the value to this book. Your foreword, it's really, really praiseworthy, and we are all very thankful. Secondly, what I was thinking, this book is not simply to see, to check, to observe any of the technical or intellectual. It is actually the teamwork and the intellectual level is streamlining. I could see so many students, they have given their intellect, they have given their brilliant contribution to this book. That is a great for me. What the authors, other authors, or the different writers who have contributed to this book, really, really great. It's not so easy to pen down or to write something very, very different or unique. Your unique ideas, your unique thought process, I think it's a book is the outcome of your thought process, your thinking, your intellectual brilliance. I think it's really a great book. When we would, when all in the market or outside it will go, then certainly it would be much appreciative. But here, much of the appreciation I'll give to my students. One, the author in the capacity of the writer and author, and one in the capacity of the editorial committee. I think we couldn't have this much of the great research-oriented students. They have, I think, sometimes I feel that they are beyond even our faculty members in writing, in using the language, in using the and giving their innovative ideas and their thought process. I really, really appreciate our editorial committee. Faculty means editor Ekta Gupta is a wonderful. I always use, if I informally tell, he is a publishing house of our ALS. This is very true. I've seen so much of dedication, and the reliable person, and how the minute details she used to go, and she takes pains every time. So many books. How she does, I know, but certainly our student strong team is with her. They are also equally deserve appreciation and praise. I'm really thankful to see the Jyoti from the Bloomsbury. I think she has joined. I'm really, really grateful, thankful to Ms. Jyoti for yours communication with Ekta. I was in CC, so I could see what is going between you. Such a cordial relation, which should be there, I think, expect between the author, editor, and publisher. So that is a very, very cordial and very, very smooth. I was happy. I couldn't find any time I should intervene or I should say something, because it was so perfectly done. I should notify, and I'm telling you right now. So I'm very, very happy. It's a great achievement. It's not me or Ekta or the student. It's an achievement of the Amity Law School, Noida, which is the contribution of all of us. So thank you once again, Professor Rajendra Pratap sir. As I told you, your foreword has given a value addition feather to this book. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Chairman sir would be joining. He is in some other meeting, so I've requested sir during this time, so he will try to join in between. But I think show should move on. Please,
Yes.
Ekta.
Sir, please, the book is released and under your blessing, sir. So thank you so much. Akshdeep, next, please.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, sir. I request Ms. Swati Kaushal, ma'am, who is editor to Amity International Journal of Legal and Multidisciplinary Studies, to release the journal now.
Nay, we request the dignitary, sir is here to release the journal, and Swati is going to say the few words about the journal.
Ekta, I will intervene here. Chairman sir is joining in 1 minute. So again, you repeat the cover, book cover again, and the journal again when sir joins. Okay.
Yes. Swati, you please continue with the details of the journal. Meanwhile, sir will join.
Good afternoon, everyone. I proudly welcome you all to the release of Amity International Journal of Legal and Multidisciplinary Studies, Volume 4, Issue 8, December 2020. First of all, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our Honorable Founder, Sir Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, our Chancellor, Dr. Atul Chauhan, our Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Balvinder Shukla, our Chairman of Amity Law School, Professor Dr. D.K. Bandyopadhyay, and our Head of Institutions and Editor-in-Chief, Professor Dr. Shifali Radha Ma'am, and Dr. Aditya Tomar Sir for the relentless support and blessings. Amity International Journal of Legal and Multidisciplinary Studies is the sincere initiative of senior faculties of Amity Law School, Noida, with the aim to promote the interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary researchers across the globe. Amity International Journal is an independent blind review journal to publish articles from academicians, scholars, and researchers. Its aim is to provide common platform to discuss the key issues relevant for human discourse in present scenario, and also to encourage them for free exchange of ideas across the globe. We aim to promote integration of disciplines as the legal world today is complex and intrinsically dynamic. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the editorial board members comprising of Professor Dr. Meenu Gupta, Dr. Neeru Sharan Ma'am, Dr. Ekta Gupta, Dr. Harshita Singh, and Dr. Rupinder Kaur. Special mention to our student editorial board comprising of Pratyush Chanakya, Akshdeep Gupta, Shruti Gupta, Devyani Prasad, and Akansh Prakash, whose role has been essential in completing the scope and mission of the journal, in making sure that we publish insightful and significant academic content in the area of practitioners, researchers, teacher cognition, and reflective practice. On behalf of all the editorial members, I am also grateful to our authors who have contributed to the success of our journal and the quality of the final published papers that you will read in our pages. I would also like to appreciate the contributions from students of our institution and the faculty members. The present volume has assorted research content from varied legal arenas, which I'm confident will provide us all with valuable insights and innovative approaches to address most pressing questions of prism of law and legal policy.
Here I want to mention we have left with one more, our editor who has been recently joined, Dr. Swati Bijawat. She is also in one of our editorial board. Swati, you have done a lot of hard work in this, coordinating with me so well. Ma'am? Ma'am?
You are asking me or Swati Bijawat?
Ma'am, I'm asking you, ma'am. Sir has joined.
Sir is joining. Sir, I think he just maybe because he's. But I would say for journal, it's a volume 4 and issue 8. Eight issues have been published, and what the quality our editorial committee try to maintain the quality of articles and the variety of the topics, and because it is a multidisciplinary study. So the fundamental things, the editorial board, or edit means the faculty who are the members and the students committee members, they have maintained. I am very, very sure how in a proper way since beginning they have maintained the quality, they have maintained how the objective of this multidisciplinary journal should be remain intact. So that is what, it's a great achievement of the Amity Law School, Noida. I could remember that in the beginning, when we have put up this idea to start our own journal, and the faculty from the different domains and disciplines, they have joined and they have shown their interest and they have shown their courage to start from the scratch. So that is very appreciative. I think today I'm sitting here just to praise, because I could see the outcome and the output of all these publications, research ideas of and the contribution of the students. I think Chairman sir has joined, and Ekta, I will request again you please share some book cover, what you have done, and just speak a little bit about.
Yes. Aditi, book cover. Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, today is the release under your blessing, sir's blessing. Today, there are the two releases where the contribution made by Dr. Rajendra Pratap Gupta, sir. He has given us his valuable foreword, sir. This book is on clinical trials, regulatory legal controls, and biological warfare, and it has been published by Hart's Blueberry. Comprises of 34 authors, sir, many academicians from our college. I have given a name of the few: Richi Lal, Nilima Devi, Nilakshi, Yadav, Dr. Harshita Singh, and many more. Students also, sir, your blessing, sir, for the release. Your blessing.
No, I think it's a great one.
Thank you, sir.
And
Sir, I
it
would
is-
say your message, your blessings are in the form of the message. The hard copy will be there, then you can see it's a great motivation from you and guidance and support in the form of the message what we received for this book from you. So thank you so much, sir. Sorry for intervention, sir. Yes, sir, please.
So congratulations. And it's good that, whatever you are doing it, you are translating them with a permanent record, and would be helpful to the law students. And this will be very handy, because there must be how many clinical trials that has been incorporated here?
Sir, there are around 34 chapters in it.
34 chapters, essentially related to biological warfare, majorly.
Yes, it is covering everything: behavioral pattern, clinical trials, and what are the regulative legal controls, suggestions, and everything, recommendations.
No, but majorly on biological warfare, is it not?
Yes, what we are dealing recently, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Very good, very good. Congratulations. And you are the editor, Dr. Rajada, the editor-in-chief. And who are the other persons involved in it?
So, Dr. Rupinder Kaur, she has supported throughout technically, and in the student editorial board, there are 5 to 6 students: Akshati Gupta, Vanshika Jha, Pratush Sonakia, Vani Vishal, and Ananya Kukriti, sir.
Are they sub-editors?
They are student editorial board, sir.
Students editorial board. Very
Yes.
good, very good, very good. So congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Aksh, please continue. Vote of thanks.
Please
Bye.
continue, please continue.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I parallelly another two, 3 meetings are going on.
Journal also, if you could show to sir, and then vote of.
So the another volume of journal is also being released today under your blessing, sir. And editorial board, it comprises of 8 editors. That is, Professor Ma'am is the editor-in-chief, Professor Shefali Raizada, Professor Dr. Meenu Gupta, Dr. Neeru Sharan, myself, Dr. Harshita Singh, Swati Kaushal, Swati Bijawat, and Dr. Rupinder Kaur. This,
Very good. It was pending for a long time.
yes, sir. 8 volumes.
Now we have to put our efforts so that we can include it in the UGC CAL list.
Yes, sir. Blessings.
Because you know that Dr. Ajada and myself had to fight with the authority to get this journal. And she was so committed that, you know, law education is going to be multidisciplinary. Now in NEP 2020, they are talking about, and we did it in 2018, I believe so.
Yes, sir. It was around 17, 18. Yes, sir. Akshdeep, please continue. Aditi.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Just a minute.
Call Dr. Harshita Singh.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, when we are towards the end of the event, I request our faculty co-convener, Dr. Harshita Singh, ma'am, to deliver the vote of thanks. We are so thankful for her constant support for putting a structure in place for the successful functioning of the society. Ma'am.
So thank you very
Am
much.
I audible?
Thank you very much. I will take leave because, you know, I have got another 2 meetings going on.
Okay,
So thank you very much, and all the best.
okay, thank you so much.
Keep on doing sustainable activities, and I'm especially addressing to the students, because unless and until you are totally involved, faculty will be guiding you, faculty will be giving the direction, Dr. Ajada will be facilitating it, she will also give her, you know, different types of inputs, but it is you who have to come forward and do the activities. And I am very proud, I feel proud that we have got quite good number of students, those who are very progressive, and those who want to take up something new, because any education institution of repute, they should not go on traditional thing. They must try to, you know, explore different new activities, new options, new avenues. And that is the way we will become leader and not the followers. And this is the message every time I am trying to give it to everybody in the in law school, Noida, and to my students also. And this is not my message, it is the message from founder president, sir. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Harshita.
Thank you, Ekta ma'am, for giving me this opportunity. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of Amity Law School, Noida, and on behalf of Amity Center for Gender Justice and Child Rights, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the honorable delegates who blessed us with their presence. I am thankful to our beloved, respected, honorable founder president, sir, Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, respected honorable chancellor, sir, Dr. Atul Chauhan, respected honorable vice chancellor, ma'am, Professor Dr. Balvinder Shukla, for their blessings. I'm also thankful to our chairman, sir, Professor Dr. D.K. Bandha Upadhyay, our joint HOIs, Professor Dr. Shefali Raizada and Professor Dr. Aditya Tomar, for providing encouragement and support, and also giving us an opportunity to organize this event. Today, my words are not enough to express the gratitude to our esteemed guest. I would like to thank to Mr. Guru Prakash Paswan, National Spokesperson BJP, who graced this occasion with his thought-provoking address on the topic constitutional morality arising in the era of pandemic. Sir beautifully explained the word soul and spirit in the Indian Constitution defined by Dr. Ambedkar, and also gives us a new perspective regarding legal technology. Thank you so much, sir. I would also like to extend a special thank to Professor Rajendra Pratap Gupta for inspiring us. The way sir explained the topic is exemplary and really close to the reality, and gives us a futuristic approach on the usage of artificial intelligence. Thank you so much, sir. I would like to thank to our convener, Ms. Ekta Gupta, because without her support, this event can't be possible. Ma'am, you are the pillar of Amity Center for Gender Justice and Child Rights. Thank you, Ekta ma'am. And we all know that no program can become successful with a single person. Okay, so I extend my big thanks to all my student volunteers, Mr. Akshdeep, Ms. Vanshika Jha, Mr. Abhinav Narayan, Miss Aditi, and Miss Ananya for making this event successful. Thank you, guys. Thank you so, so much. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. Ekta ma'am, can we end the meeting now?
Yeah, thank you all, Akshti, Vanshika, Aditi,